Hello, everyone. This is your host, Susan Rosen. And today, my guest is Dr. John Lewis. And he has some very interesting things that he did, and where he's taken all of that now. And I'm going to ask him to introduce himself and tell us a little bit more about himself and what he's doing now.
Hi, Susan. Thank you for
Welcome.
having me. Thank you for
Thank
having me,
you.
Susan. It's nice to be here with you and your listeners. Well, I'm a physiologist by training, and I've had a long interest actually started out, if you can call exercise or sports as, loosely a part of health, but earlier in my life, more interested in like performance as opposed to really strictly health, and then shifted into health as I got older into my 20s. But then I sort of morphed more from the physical activity exercise side to nutrition, which is what I've really focused on for most of my career. And I spent about 20 years full time at the University of Miami Miller School of Medicine I was running clinical trials in nutrition, dietary supplements, exercise training, and worked a very long time really in the trenches of running these clinical trials, which is definitely not for the weak of heart. I mean, if you think you can only work 40 hours a week and just kind of be sort of half focused on what you're doing, you're not going to survive very long. But I got to a point about 6 years ago where after making some discoveries in some of the research that we conducted, plus just sort of doing an inventory of myself of what I wanted for the rest of my life and where I thought my life should go. I looked around at some of my colleagues, and gosh, even some of them in their 80s, if you can believe that. I mean, people that had been doing, that kind of work in academics for 50, 60 years. And I just thought, man, that's not me. I mean, it's so dependent on begging the government and foundations and even individuals for funding. And after 20 years, I'd had enough. So I left academics full time. I still have a voluntary appointment at the university, but I left full time, and I really wanted to focus on my dietary supplement ideas and turning that into a business and taking some of these incredible discoveries we made to the larger community. I felt like being in academics was a bit of a hindrance in terms of what I could do and what I could say. Whereas opposed to being, in business for myself, I felt like I could really get to a larger audience eventually. Now, that hasn't been a bowl of cherries either. I mean, being in business for myself is kind of like in a sine wave. You're up and down, you have your peaks and your valleys. But I have very good science. My products help people, and those are the two most important things compared to most dietary supplement companies out there. And I feel like I'm doing it the right way. I'm not trying to just be a slick marketer. And with all due respect to people that really know marketing, I don't. I mean, I'm learning as I'm going through this process, but it's not this foundation of my mission or my purpose is science based, and it always will be. So anything that I sell is what I take. My family, close friends, anyone who I know in my life, in my own circle, that I would recommend to them. So, this is not anything about me saying or doing things that I'm telling the world, and then meanwhile I'm not doing for myself. So I exercise, I exercise every day. I eat a certain way, I supplement, I do all these things that I talk about in my work. And so I feel like being that kind of model for other people is very important, and that's what I think that type of credibility is sorely needed, and especially in today's day and age of so many mixed messages in the media. People are constantly wondering, especially when it comes to things like weight loss. Of course, that's a terrible area when it comes to so many people today who are either overweight or obese. It's just staggering. And people are obviously confused. So I want to be the opposite of that, in the sense of anything that anyone hears me say that I would recommend to people to help improve their health is certainly what I'm doing for myself. So that to me is very important, having that level of credibility and trust that people who get to know me understand and say, hey, yeah, that guy does what he says he does. So and I spent, that 20-year period, I published about 100, and I think I'm close to about 190 peer-reviewed articles in my career, lectured all over the world. lectured all over the world. I'm hopefully releasing my first book sometime this year.
Oh,
After many years of talking to people about my work and saying, well, here I've got this article that we published on whatever, and
mhm.
unfortunately most of the time that didn't really work too well. And so I thought, well, how can I, how I put my thinking cap on. I thought, well, how can I better connect to lay people, basically? What
Yeah,
resonates with lay people? And so
yeah,
typically it's a book. I mean, if you write a book, you have that level of connection with people that are not
uh-huh.
scientists or not
Yes.
health professionals. So I've been working on that for the last couple of years, and I think hopefully in the
Ah,
next 6 or so months, maybe by the end of the year, I'll have that ready to be published as
great.
well. So
Uh-huh.
so again, Susan, it's all about providing what I think is good information, credible
Hmm.
information, and even more importantly, information that actually helps people. Because again, whether you're talking about obesity, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, depression, I mean, they're just, as you know,
Hmm.
so many chronic diseases running rampant today, and they all have a base in lifestyle or behavior, which, taking
Yeah.
that one step further is all about what we stick in our mouths. And
Yes.
and
Yes.
so
Yes.
we're just really I think we're at a kind of at a crossroads where we really have to get people to understand, the value of what you put in your mouth and how that ultimately leads to who you are every day and how you function
Mm,
every day. And I just
mm.
think most people they don't get it. They completely ignore all of that. And so that's part of what I do is, helping people to understand the value of health, but also through some very specific recommendations related to some of the research that I've done, if you'd like to talk more about that as well.
Oh yeah, no, for sure, for sure. Well, and the other thing that comes to mind when you're talking about, people taking things or not taking things or whatever, um, and I'm probably just as guilty of this as a lot of people. I take way too many supplements.
Okay.
Way too many supplements. I'll read about this. Oh, that's I need that. Oh, read about this. Oh yeah, that's another, and my husband will find some, and it's like, and then he'll stop and he'll look at me and go, we get too many of these. We got way too many. And it's like, yeah, I know. And then there's things I used to take. I don't take those anymore, but I've got new ones that I'm taking. You know, it's boy, I'll look forward to your book because it would be wonderful to have something where I just went to and said, okay, here's the 6 things that I need to take, and that's it.
Well, that's an interesting thought. I don't know. I don't
Or
know
at
if we
least to
can get
start
down to
with. How's that?
six.
To start with. Well,
Right.
so maybe we're not taking too many. I don't know.
Maybe not. I mean, that's an interesting question. I think it's possible, especially if you consider. I mean, you're obviously more knowledgeable than the average person. So
Mm,
it kind of comes down to, and that's one thing that sometimes people will ask me, well, what should I be taking? Like,
mm,
what supplement, or how should I eat, or what do you think is important to
uh-huh.
take every day? And
Yeah.
especially when it comes to dietary supplements, I like to tell people that it's basically any other consumer decision you make, whether it's buying a car or deciding which neighborhood you want to live in, or a watch, or your
Mm-hmm.
lawnmower, whatever it is. I mean, typically people make, they do a little research and then they make a decision, whether it's maybe
Right.
with Consumer Reports as something that's useful
Yeah.
for advice, or some
Yeah.
other source that they use for.
Consumer Lab. I like Consumer Lab.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I tell people, do your homework as well. I mean, look at companies that
Mm-hmm.
support their products with research. I think that's very important. Again,
Mm,
and that's what I'm doing with mine.
mm-hmm.
Make sure that the quality of the products is there. Make sure that they're buying ingredients from, that are reputable, that have been third party tested. I mean, there are definitely certain thresholds that companies can abide by that give confidence to consumers that you're buying something that is actually on the label, that it is
Mm-hmm.
there, and that it potentially can be helpful. So But I think for me, like in the work that I've done with these polysaccharides that hopefully we'll talk
Yeah.
about, is
Yes, please.
for me, that's where I have such a really cool opportunity to help people understand that it's something that's very unique. It's definitely not in a lot of other products. I mean, I have a few competitors out there, but not many. But it's an opportunity to teach people something. Psychologists talk about the teachable moment. Well, polysaccharides are definitely a teachable moment because almost everybody I encounter has never even thought of the value of polysaccharides. So
Mm-hmm.
I think, I mean, I'm certainly happy to help you and your husband anytime you like
Yeah,
to.
yeah. No, I understand. I'm just, I'm, as you say, I'm probably more educated than a lot of people around it, and
Mhm.
I'm still,
Wondering.
it's like the next best, the next great thing, right? Oh
Right.
yeah, this is supposed to be great, So, but yeah, we could go down that road for a while. But I really I am interested to hear more about the polysaccharides and what you've found with that, and how that has kind of turned what you're working on
Sure.
around. So,
Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge two people that introduced me to the importance of these polysaccharides. One from aloe vera, Dr. Rich McDaniel, and the other one from rice bran, Miss Barbara Kimley. Both of these people completely opened my eyes. I mean, what I learned in graduate school in biochemistry about polysaccharides might have been a half a lecture. I mean, it was hardly anything. And
maybe, huh? Maybe.
maybe, exactly, maybe. And the only thing that we really discussed about saccharides back in those days was that saccharides are an energy source, which they still are, but there's so much more than that. But Susan, what really became apparent to me, and this is not just my own personal experience, but this is, through Dr. McDaniel and Miss Kimley and all these other people that I ended up getting involved with over the last nearly 20 years, is that these polysaccharides, especially from aloe vera and rice bran. I mean, we could talk about others that come from, say, mushrooms, like reishi, maitake, those kinds of things, ginkgo biloba, hemp, marijuana. I mean, there are a lot of plants that have polysaccharides, but in my own experience, I've yet to encounter two that are so effective and so efficacious for human health than the ones that come from aloe vera and rice bran. So I could have initially started this by saying, well, sugars are good for you. But most people, I'm sure, who listen to your show, because of the way the mass media and even social media present sugar as being like the devil, basically. Like it's,
Oh yeah, one of
right.
those. Yeah.
You can't consume any sugar. Like oh no, that's horrible for you. To me, that's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. That's such terrible advice, because a sugar is not a sugar is not a sugar. A sugar, Mother Nature provides us with many sugars, but it depends on the type of sugar and whether or not you should be focused on that or not. And so if you're talking about something like high fructose corn syrup, I totally agree with you. You want to avoid that in your food. But if you're talking about these complex polysaccharides that are found in aloe vera and rice bran, these are entirely different animals, and they do some amazing things for our cells. So really, when you think of sugars, whether you're talking about a simple sugar, like again, fructose, or a monosaccharide like fructose, a disaccharide like sucrose, or a polysaccharide like mannose, for example. These are very, very different molecules. And it all comes down to their chains and their molecular structure. But that's we won't go any farther than that. But
Yeah.
the other thing that I like to tell people is it doesn't matter to me if you eat a plant-based diet like I do, or if you're now into, there's a big carnivore craze now, people only meat. And of course, keto, it has its big place. Paleo, it has its place. Mediterranean, Zone, Atkins, I mean, South Beach, just so many different Weight Watchers, whatever it is that, you think of as being your preferred diet style. You're not getting these polysaccharides, certainly not from aloe vera. I know no one who eats aloe vera. You might be getting a little bit if you eat brown rice every day, but even then, you're probably getting not a therapeutic amount. And of course, most of the world.
And let me just also, number one, ask if you can tell people what aloe vera is.
Sure.
Because they probably aren't familiar with that. Brown rice, I'm sure they are. But And oh, I was just going to say one other thing, and now I can't remember what it was. It'll come back to me. Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about
Sure.
what those are, or unless that was further along in
No, no, that's okay.
conversation.
No, that's
Yeah.
fine. I was just going to say that, just to finish that last point, most of the
Yeah.
world prefers to eat white rice. And so when rice is milled, the bran is stripped off, and most of the time the bran ends up getting fed to livestock. So actually the animals, cows, pigs, chickens, whatever, they're eating the rice bran, which is the best part of rice that Mother Nature provides to us. And then meanwhile, they're eating the white rice, which is, just very simple sugar that doesn't really have much more nutrition value than that. But the aloe vera, aloe vera has been used by humans for thousands of years, basically since recorded history. But most people think of the use of aloe vera just for a sunburn or a cut or a wound, something topically. But that gel is 99% water. So to get the polysaccharides from the aloe vera gel, you really need to strip all of that water out of it. And then what you're left with is the polysaccharides or anthraquinones. I mean, there's certainly other nutrients, phytonutrients in there. But the polysaccharides, the ace mannan or the mannose, that is really the polysaccharide that is just so amazing for human health. So people sometimes will ask me, well, John, can I just drink aloe vera juice? And I'm like, well, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but if you're expecting that aloe vera juice to what we showed in our research, you're wasting your time and your money.
Yeah. That's kind of you can drink anything you want, but it depends on what you're trying to get.
Exactly. You're just in the juice, you're going to get a tiny, tiny amount of the polysaccharide. You're wasting your money and time if you think it's going to show the same thing that we did in our work with the concentrated polysaccharide source. Now, the polysaccharides don't really require you to take a lot. I mean, we're only talking about at most a couple of grams per day. I mean, we're not even talking about having, it's not like you have to eat a whole meal of these aloe polysaccharides or the rice polysaccharides. It's not anything like that. But that also is indicative of how effective these things are, that you can take these concentrated minimal amounts and then have such dramatic effects on the body. But yeah, aloe vera and rice bran I would put up pretty much against any other two plants in the plant kingdom in terms of their impact on human health.
Yeah. Well, I've always known that brown rice has a lot more nutrients, period, than white rice. White rice it's like eating white bread.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, white flour may taste good in some certain things, but it certainly isn't giving you anything other than maybe some things you don't need. But yeah, interesting. So so are you, sorry, I'm thinking in 5 different directions here.
That's okay.
The with the aloe vera, I'm assuming it's one of the basic, that and the brown rice are the kind of some of the basic building blocks in your supplements. And is there some kind of a diet or something that you recommend? Not necessarily the vegetarian versus the non-vegetarian or anything like that, but that you have certain things in your diet.
Well, our research wasn't really, I mean, in terms of like what we showed with the polysaccharides, we were very strict in terms of just providing the supplement to whatever the test was. If it was, someone with Alzheimer's, someone with MS, someone with HIV, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, those were the primary areas that we studied. But when we were running these clinical trials, we didn't mess with people's medications, diet, exercise, movement. We really didn't, because if you manipulate too many variables at the same time, then you don't know what happened, because it's hard.
Well, you don't know which one.
That's right, because you don't know then which one is having the real or true effect, if there is such an effect. So in our work, whether we were looking at nutrition or supplementation or exercise, we pretty much only stuck to one at one time. We didn't look at multiple, interventions going on at the same time. But in
Mhm.
general, if you were asking me about diet, I mean, obviously someone eating, this is my 26th year of eating a plant-based diet, I would recommend,
Uh,
eating as many colors as you can. I mean, usually that's the simplest way to get people to understand
yeah.
variety in the diet. So, pick and choose as many different colors, your red, your green, your purple, your yellow, your orange, all the different colors. And then that way,
Uh-huh.
that you're getting a wide variety of different nutrients and phytonutrients. And I think, that pretty well covers it for most people. I mean, certainly we could get more specific than that, but I think using the color scheme approach and just picking different colors, and then of course, limiting as much processing you can as, for the
Mm,
most part. I mean, certainly that plays a role as well. The more something is processed, it's like the old
right.
example of, using a baked potato versus a potato chip, and, what happened in between. So,
Yeah.
depending on what
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, you're looking for, I mean, it could make a huge difference in terms of the nutrition that you end up getting from
Mm,
that food, depending on the form that you're eating the food in.
yeah. Well, and overcooking that
Right,
meat. I don't think it's as bad now,
right.
but it certainly was when I was growing up, you know, mushy vegetables. That's why nobody ever ate them or
Hmm.
wanted to eat them because they taste as bad as the as what you're getting.
Sure. Hmm.
um, so I've read, and you can tell me if this is incorrect or correct, that it is better with a lot of vegetables just to kind of very slightly cook them. It makes the nutrients and everything in there more accessible than eating it when it's raw. Is that
So it
correct or
depends
not?
on the food, right? I mean, like
Uh-huh.
tomatoes, for example, tomatoes, their lycopene is more bioavailable if they're stewed or cooked as opposed to
Okay.
raw tomatoes.
Okay.
And of course, we're talking about beans, we mentioned rice, potatoes, these are things that have lectins when they're raw. So
Right.
it could potentially be very toxic if you try to eat a raw bean. So you want to
Yeah.
cook those so the lectins get broken down and then they're no longer
Mm-hmm.
an issue for digestion.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
certainly there are examples of things that, yes, I think even like steaming broccoli,
Mm-hmm.
the endos are more bioavailable if you
Yep.
steam it as
Yep.
opposed to eating the broccoli raw. So yeah, there are definitely examples of comparing the different nutrients and certain key phytonutrients depending on if you're eating the food raw versus cooked.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But to your point about overcooking, of course, you can definitely increase the carcinogenic material of especially meats. If you cook
Mm,
meat,
yeah.
like grilling meat is a bad thing to do. I mean, if you're going to eat meat, like don't grill it. That's the absolute worst way to eat your meat because you're turning the fats into very carcinogenic material.
Oh
So it's
yeah.
kind
Yeah,
of
that
like
makes sense.
eating grilled meat is kind of like the equivalent of smoking cigarettes. You're getting all these carcinogens in the
Ah,
grilled
okay.
meat as opposed to baking it or some kind of a cooking method that doesn't require such high heat.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I don't we don't do a lot of meat. I eat cheese, but I only do goat. I can't do cows.
Okay.
I can't eat things that come from cows.
Mm-hmm.
I have too much of an allergic reaction to them.
Oh yeah. Well, we could do a whole show just on breast fluid from cows. I mean, I've given quite a few lectures over the years about dairy and the
Mm,
problems associated with dairy for human beings. It's
hmm.
tragic what people are doing to themselves with dairy. It's really not. It's not
Yeah.
intended for humans.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. That's yeah, I do. I do goat cheese, which is a
Hmm.
little more accessible
Right.
than the cow stuff. But yeah, it's hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting because what just came to mind, which is on not exactly a totally different subject, but um, it's interesting how there's a lot of like pork, but you don't see any pork or pig dairy kinds of
Never heard of it,
products.
right?
It's
No.
all meat. It only just, I mean, I just,
Hmm. Yeah,
means
I've never.
I've been eating it for a long time, and it never occurred to me that there's no cheese, there's no interest. Yeah,
Right.
huh? I wonder if they. Oh, well, nothing. Sorry, I'm going down a different rabbit hole. Um, so okay, so tell me a little bit more about polysaccharides, how you work with them and put them into your supplements, and how how it's recommended to take them, and um, with what people can expect to have that help with.
Sure. Well, let me, if I may,
Hmm.
I'll summarize a little bit of the research that we conducted to kind of
Great.
establish the base, and then that way
Hmm.
people will have a better idea of what it is that I'm referring to. But
Good.
we ran, as I mentioned, several clinical trials. The two in Alzheimer's and MS were really the foundation for the aloe vera. The ones in HIV, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and then another study in healthy people. Those were more on the rice bran side, but nonetheless, they showed consistent effects over time. So I don't know if you've had any family member affected with Alzheimer's disease. I grew up very lucky. I mean, my
Yeah.
grandparents, aunts, uncles, my dad, they all died of basically everything but dementia or Alzheimer's. So I wasn't
Yeah.
personally affected
Yeah.
with it in my family, but man, after running that study, wow. I mean, what a horrible disease it is. It's just, to lose your mind. I mean, to still be here
Yeah.
physically, but then lose
Yeah.
your
Oh,
mind.
yeah.
What a
No, that's
horrible
it.
state.
Yeah. My father had Parkinson's,
Okay.
as
He
did.
had the cognitive issues
Yeah.
along with it, or he did? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And again, 10 kids in the family, 4 of them, I think, got Parkinson's,
Oh, wow.
which is kind of unusual, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's right there with Alzheimer's and MS as being the three leading neurodegenerative
Yes.
disorders, as you know. And so
Yep.
we we chose to run this trial. We actually just, it was only because of the generosity of a family who had lost 4 members to Alzheimer's. They happened to see my colleague, Dr. McDaniel, that I mentioned, giving a
Hmm.
lecture, and they were really encouraged
Oh.
by what he was doing with people with
Uh-huh.
Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. And so the wife developed a relationship with him. And then she said, after getting to know him, and then
Yeah.
she and her husband decided, hey, we've got some extra money. We'd like to donate to science.
Wow.
And we were very encouraged by what talking about with nutrition. We'd like to help
Uh-huh.
you in this work, but
Yeah.
our only requirement is that you do a study in Alzheimer's. So
Okay.
that's how we got
Okay.
the
That
money
makes
to.
sense.
That's how we got the money to run this study. Well, anyway, we ran this trial in people with moderate to severe Alzheimer's, which is really the worst. I mean, they're the
Oh my
people
God,
that
yes.
big pharma, they're not interested in them because they're too far gone, basically. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
as I'm sure you can't turn on the news like every week or two, you'll hear some article about either something going on at FDA or somebody else in a lab somewhere trying to come up with something for dementia. It's just practically impossible when you think of
Yeah.
it's now the sixth leading killer of Americans.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't even find consensus on what actually causes the disease.
No, no.
No one even exactly knows what really causes it, because when you're thinking, well, maybe it's the amyloid beta or the tau or the plaques or the tangles, but yet there are many people who have all those features, but they don't
That's
have
right.
the disease. And
Right.
then there's another group of people who have the disease, but they don't have any of those features.
Right. Yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
no
Yeah. There's no
there's no
cause and effect
consensus.
kind of
No,
relationship going on. Yeah.
no, there's no true consensus to this disease. So
Yeah.
it's truly a mystery. And again, that's why Big Pharma, I think, has chosen not to focus on it over these last few years. But anyway, the
Mm-hmm.
study, we looked at people over a 12-month period.
Mm-hmm.
We drew their blood at baseline in 12 months because we didn't have the budget to draw the blood every quarter, but we did the neurocognitive assessment every 3 months. So baseline, 3, 6, 9, and 12 months. And Susan, I mean, we ended up discovering some things that just completely blew us away. And oh, by the
Uh-huh.
way, the psychiatrist and the other staff that we were working with, they were very skeptical because all they did was pharma studies. They didn't do nutrition.
Uh-huh.
And they thought, well, you guys have some money. We've got a lot of patients. We don't think your product's going to do anything, but we'll help you. I mean, that literally they told us that. Like, we don't think nutrition's going to do anything here.
If it works, great. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, we start the study, we get everything approved, we get everything up and running. We get the first few people enrolled, and then over that first 3 or so month period, and these were people that were coming, they were either already living at the facility. It was a facility that had an outpatient center, and then it had inpatient for either people that needed nursing home care or like an assisted living facility. So it's a pretty big center that caters to elderly people, and especially for dementia and Alzheimer's patients. And so, the people were there, they either lived there or they were coming there every day for like the daycare socialization. So these were people that, were very familiar with the staff and vice versa. And so as we start the study, we start enrolling people on the product. Within the first 3 months or so, after we've got like the first, say, 4, 5, 6 people enrolled, I start getting phone calls from caregivers. I start getting these kinds of messages of, oh, hey, Dr. Lewis, like my wife or my grandmother, whatever the relationship was, is now doing things that she hasn't done in some cases in years, like tears of joy. These people are calling me crying like babies of tears of joy of, how their loved one is responding. Now, and then I'm starting to get calls from the staff, like this previously very skeptical staff is now calling me, telling me very much the same thing, like, wow, I can't believe what Mrs. So-and-so is now doing, like, or what Mr. So-and-so is now doing, like, he or she has never done this ever, like. And so anyway, I'm, and of course, at this point, I'm feeling optimistic, and it's making me feel good. So it takes us probably a couple of years, 2.5 or so, to run the study, and then at the end, you compile all your data, you enter it, you clean it, you double check it, et cetera. And I'm getting the analyses going. And then sure enough, I'm thinking, okay, well, we've had all of these anecdotal responses. So let's see what the data actually show. It's one thing to get nice anecdotes, but as a scientist, you have to have, you can only rely on what the data tell you. So I start running the data, and I wanted to look at cognition first, because obviously for us, that was the most important thing to see. Did the cognition actually improve in response to taking the supplement? And remember, we didn't change their diet, we didn't change their medication, we didn't exercise them, we didn't
where they were living, any of that kind of stuff.
Nothing. We didn't change any of that. All we did was introduce the supplement into their diet. And oh, by the way, too, the caregivers were some of the most motivated people you've ever met in your life, because these people were literally desperate to try to find something that would help their loved one.
Oh, God, yes.
Like, because basically when you look at the 5 FDA approved drugs for dementia, they don't do anything. I mean, if you're lucky, they might delay decline for a few months, but then after that, you just keep falling off the cliff.
No, somebody's making money on it. That's the only reason it's out there.
That's right. Exactly. And so these folks, I mean, you want to talk about a more motivated group of people, I don't think you could find one. I mean, they're truly motivated to find something to help their loved ones. So anyway, I start running the data, and sure enough, at 9 and 12 months, we have clinically and statistically significant improvements in cognitive function.
Wow.
I mean, Susan, that just blew us away. So over that 12-month period, clinically and statistically significant improvement.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Statistical, which, sometimes you can show something statistically significant, but it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter.
That's right.
It doesn't mean anything.
Yes.
So
exactly.
That was like, that was one of those moments in my life where I wanted to, like, run, strip off all of my clothes and run around the neighborhood, screaming hallelujah. I mean, it was like, this instant,
you wanted to call and tell everybody you knew, right?
Like this, this instant euphoria of what we had just discovered. I mean, it was just so rewarding. But in addition to that, we showed reductions in inflammation according to 2 markers called TNF alpha and VEGF, which are classically looked at in heart disease and cancer. Our article was, and this was this first article was published in 2013, so it's unfortunately
Wow.
been 10 years ago that all this work was done, or at least the article.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah.
TNF alpha again and VEGF, they are proteins that our body produces in response typically to too much inflammation chronically, and that's where with dysregulated inflammation you get into trouble with either dementia or cancer or heart disease. But again, that was a really nice finding. We also showed an improvement in the CD4 to CD8 ratio, which is a global marker of immune function. And that's not just important for people with dementia or Alzheimer's, that's important for all of us. So we want that ratio to be as high as possible. And so we showed an improvement there. We showed an improvement in adult stem cell production of just under 300% from baseline to 12 months, according to CD14 cells. So again, that was very, very impressive finding. And oh, by the way, I didn't mention that the average age of the people in our study was 79.9 years of age.
Oh my God. Wow.
Yes. So these were not only people that were really sick, but they were a fairly advanced age group as well. So, and they didn't just have Alzheimer's, they had diabetes, depression, heart disease. I mean, these were very, very sick and impaired people. So imagine, you know, we think of stem cell treatment or stem cell therapy as being a big deal today. And it can be, you know, and I think there is some efficacy to, you know, for certain things, mostly related to joint issues. I mean, I don't know if it's ever going to truly be what we think it is related to, say, replacing organs or, you know, replacing teeth or any of those sorts of things. But nonetheless, to be able to turn on the body's own stem cell making process, especially at an advanced age, that was also very, just a very important finding to us. And then in two subsequent analyses, we looked at brain-derived neurotropic factor, which also is very important for like memory.
Oh my God, that's huge these days. Yeah.
And we also showed some relationships there. We published two other papers with BDNF. And then actually just a couple of weeks ago, I submitted for publication a fourth article from this study looking at what is referred to as the Th1 to Th2 ratio in immune function within these people, which has never been documented before in people with Alzheimer's.
Wow.
So that paper hopefully will be published in the next few months. I don't really want to talk too much about it yet, just because it's still in progress. But
understand,
Susan, the bottom line is, I mean, we just showed some amazing things for the very first time in people with Alzheimer's that, you know, even the staff, this previously very skeptical staff had to admit that these polysaccharides were doing something that, you know, they had never seen before. I mean, the neuropsychologist, she had worked there for 15 years. She did all the neuropsych testing on these folks. And she said every study she had worked on to date was a drug study prior to ours. And every drug study showed basically nothing. Like it didn't show any improvement in whatever they were looking at. Our study was the only study where she said, even for the subjects where the test was not sensitive enough to detect improvement, she could still tell that the person was getting better.
Wow.
So in her opinion, 100% of the subjects in our study actually got better, even if the test was not sensitive enough to detect the improvement. So this was the kind of response that we got about from this study. And as you can imagine, I mean, we published that first paper in 2013. I was on cloud nine. I still hadn't made the decision to leave academics, but what really kind of, as a little tangent, what really kind of put me over the top of leaving academics, besides, you know, what I mentioned previously about, you know, this grinding, grueling life of fundraising, was that I tried twice with NIH and twice with the Alzheimer's Association. I submitted proposals to say, look at what we're doing here. Here is not just an idea, but here's an idea with data. And you know what I got in response all four times?
Either it's not true or nothing. Yeah, right. I was going to say one or the other. Right.
I got crickets. I got zero in response.
It's not surprising. That's not surprising.
It was so dejecting to me that I was presenting an opportunity for, you know, these so-called public health experts.
Yes. You know, hello.
sitting in their ivory tower to say, hey, look at this guy, Lewis, and these people at the University of Miami. Let's give them more money to extend this line of research. And nothing. I got nothing. So for the last 10 years, that has been,
surprise me.
Yeah, I know. Well, it doesn't now me either, but for the last 10 years, this for me, this has been a very significant, I guess, frustration in my life that I couldn't get more funding to extend this very exciting research for people with such a tragic disease that still, I mean, if you look at our first paper, you know, and you compare, I mean, you don't take my word for it, compare it to, again, the 5 FDA approved drugs for dementia, any other nutritional, hyperbaric oxygen, acupuncture, music therapy, sound therapy, light therapy, whatever, compare it to anything else out there. No one has showed what we showed in response to improving what we refer to as improving nutritional status with these polysaccharides. And, you know, this is way more powerful than treating disease with a drug, right? I mean,
oh my God, yeah.
Nutrition works so differently from the pharmacological paradigm.
Oh, yeah. And better, probably 99.9% of the time. Because it's something your body recognizes.
That's right. So, but, you know, I always want to make that clear to people that, you know, that we're bound by FTC and FDA to make sure that, you know, we don't talk about nutrition as something that treats disease, but it's very easy to get people to realize the difference when you say pharmacology treats disease, nutrition provides the raw materials that our cells need to function properly. Totally different paradigm. So I don't know how we're doing on time. I don't want to just keep going.
Well, we've probably been doing this for a while now because it's almost the top of the hour.
Well, I mean, if you want me to, excuse me, if you want me to, you know, kind of cut it short from there, that's okay. Because really the Alzheimer's study was most.
I think that's the major, no, that's fine. I guess my question, and we can always do this offline, and then everybody else can just come and ask me what it is that you told me. But I'm curious about, okay, so Alzheimer's, there's a lot of other brain, like we were talking about Parkinson's and some of the other, and even just you know, and I'll put myself out there right now, right, which is that it drives me and my husband crazy in that I, you know, recalling names of things or other memory stuff is just like, you know, it takes me a while to find them.
Well,
you know, so would the polysaccharides be helping that as well, do you think? Or I mean, is it worth something that's worth trying? Or I mean, I'm not asking for a see, here we go, a prescription.
Right. Well,
but I'm just curious, you know, are you going to start now looking at other, let's put it that way, looking at other brain related issues?
Well, let's put it this way. So going back to what I said about what we looked at in the Alzheimer's study, so we tested cognition, which is an all-encompassing, overlapping term for not just memory. A lot of times people use memory with being synonymous with cognition. Memory is just one aspect of cognition. But to your point about recall, so you have recall, you have processing speed, executive functioning, spatial awareness, time awareness, long-term memory, short-term memory. There are many different things that fall under this umbrella term of cognition. So we actually looked at all that. So all of those things related to cognition that, to your point, like recall, I mean, I've had people with, you know, for example, brain fog, people with, again, what you're describing.
That's me.
You know, this issue with recalling names, places, events, things, those kinds of things. I mean, across the board, you know, again, whatever maybe little bucket that you fall into, no question, I mean, and I didn't even mention so when I left academics and, you know, eventually got into this idea of a dietary supplement company, we now refer to this product as Daily Brain Care, which is under my company, Dr. Lewis Nutrition. So I didn't even mention that yet, but yes, I mean, if you look at you go to our website, look at some of the product
Mhm.
reviews, look at some of the testimonial videos, you will see people describing lots of different things, and actually not just
Mhm.
things related to the brain. I mean, there are other things related to the
Right.
joints, gut
Which
function.
makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, so, and again, as you know, as I think I mentioned to you once before, the
Mhm.
brain is just really the area that we started to focus on initially because
Mhm.
of the work that
Mhm.
we did at the University of Miami, combined with the need for
Right.
people that have something brain related. But
Yes.
the
Yes.
reality is the polysaccharides work on all 30 plus trillion cells in our body. So
Wow.
regardless
Okay.
of your current health status, and
Mhm.
as I mentioned, despite whatever type
Yeah.
of eating style you prefer, you're not getting these polysaccharides in your diet. So that's where I think these
Or at least not
polysaccharides
enough of them. Yeah.
they can make a big difference for anyone. I mean, I've been taking my own product for 10 years. Like, again, as I
Right. And
mentioned,
you
I'm
know how to eat. So, it's just that extra
exactly.
bump.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, I don't think that you can, and there's no such thing as like either overdosing or
Mm.
becoming like a hypo-responsive situation where
Mhm.
your body creates like almost a threshold or a tolerance where you
Yeah.
don't need them anymore. There's no such thing as that
Yeah.
either. I mean, these polysaccharides are just like oxygen or water or vitamins or
Okay.
minerals. You need them every day.
Okay.
So
Okay.
absolutely, they're
No,
very
that's
important.
great.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
I would encourage anybody to go to our website,
Yes.
drlewisnutrition.com, and read more information. If anyone
Yeah.
has questions, they can contact me there. We
Okay.
have
Okay.
social media channels as well on Instagram,
Oh,
Facebook, YouTube, TikTok.
wow. Okay.
We're expanding our social media presence, although that's not where we want it to be yet. But we're hopefully
Hmm.
we'll eventually get there. But
Yeah.
I'm very much the kind of person who knows his limitations. Like, I can create content all day long. I can have these kinds of conversations with folks like yourself,
Yeah.
but then I need help with people that have the technical knowledge of, how
Mm.
to get the information out to people, and then,
Right.
helping to create, an awareness through all this
Yeah.
information. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
No,
where
absolutely.
that's where I need
Absolutely.
help.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and wrap up here. I will put all your relevant information in the show notes as well. Not
Okay.
although I've never been sure that anybody actually looks at the show notes, but that's a whole nother discussion, right? They
Right.
listen, but they're off doing other things when they're listening.
Right.
So looking at the show notes,
Right.
So, anyways, okay. And I will say in wrapping up that, which I have to say, which is that neither of us are doctors in the medical,
Right.
giving medical advice, and they shouldn't be seeing this as medical advice. There's a
Right.
lot of information out there that they can go and get to give them some more information. And I will see everybody next week.